Welcome, traveler of the stars. You've arrived at the infinite scientist, where science dreams in the language of the cosmos. Tonight, we drift backward through the quiet corridors of time, to the age before memory, before song, before even the whisper of wings. If you find beauty in the mysteries of the universe, let your curiosity rest here. Subscribe and dream with us beneath the stars. In the beginning, there was only silence, a planet wrapped in fire and fog, turning endlessly under a dim young sun. The air shimmered with dust, and the oceans boiled in restless tides. Nothing yet moved freely, no breath, no leaf, no sound except the slow heaving of Earth's molten heart. It was a world waiting to inhale, but deep within that quiet chaos, life was already at work. Invisible, patient, ancient. In shallow waters, single cells drifted like flecks of dust in liquid light. They consumed sunlight, released oxygen, and began to stitch an atmosphere from nothing. The sky, once heavy with poison, started to change. Slowly, the Earth remembered how to breathe. Eons passed, oceans calmed, the sun grew softer in its light. Along the shores, strange green mats spread outward, colonies of cyanobacteria exhaling oxygen into the wind. That invisible breath transformed everything. The air thickened, the seas cleared, and the stage for complexity was quietly built, molecule by molecule. Imagine it. The first time a wave carried air that could sustain breath. The first gust of wind that would one day fill the lungs of a creature that had not yet evolved. Every cloud, every drop of rain, every shimmer of morning dew carried traces of those earliest exhalations. From that sacred exchange, plants were born. The first mosses clung to wet rock. Ferns unfurled under the new sky. Forests followed, towering, endless, filled with the slow pulse of photosynthesis. For the first time, the Earth had lungs. The continents shimmered in green, and the planet exhaled in rhythm with its living surface. The atmosphere became a dialogue, plants breathing out, animals soon breathing in. The chemistry of air became the poetry of existence. What had once been a wasteland now glittered with the promise of sound. The rustle of leaves, the fall of rain, the hum of life learning to sing. It was here, in this slow awakening, that the story of dinosaurs began. Not yet in bones or thunder, but in the invisible alchemy of air. Without oxygen, no beating heart could grow large, no blood could rush fast, no creature could rule the land. The forests prepared the way, each fern and tree an architect of future giants. Time, patient and endless, sculpted continents and carved rivers through stone. The world's breath grew deeper. Carbon was trapped in roots and soil, and oxygen soared to new heights. With every century, the atmosphere grew richer, an unseen tide that would lift evolution to grandeur. Imagine standing there if you could, 400 million years before your own existence. The air would taste sharp, metallic, fresh. Trees would stretch hundreds of feet above you, their bark thick as stone, their roots tangled in ancient swamps. The sky would glow a deeper blue, the clouds shaped by a new rhythm of climate and breath. And somewhere within that world, insects hummed with translucent wings, the first to claim the gift of flight. The forests exhaled, and Earth listened. Every breath filled the world with balance. Carbon exchanged for oxygen, decay transformed into renewal. It was a system without architects or kings, only the slow intelligence of nature finding harmony in chaos. Then, somewhere deep in the Carboniferous dawn, the forests became cathedrals, Giant trees like lepidodendrons and sigillaria rose above the mist, their trunks patterned like ancient runes. Beneath them, amphibians crept among roots as thick as pillars. The earth was no longer just breathing, it was dreaming. Those dreams gave rise to time itself, cycles of day and night, seasons of growth and decay. The pulse of air and light became the clockwork of evolution. For millions of years, that rhythm never faltered. It was the sound of a planet alive, but nothing in the universe stays still. Oxygen, the gift that brought life, also became the fuel for change. Creatures learned to use it not just to live, but to move, to run, to swim, to climb. Muscles burned brighter, hearts beat faster, and blood became the river of possibility. From these forests and swamps, the first reptiles emerged. Small, silent, resilient. They carried the memory of water within them, but learned to walk where rivers ended. And in their lungs, the earth's breath continued. A legacy from the first green leaves to the first beating hearts. Those tiny reptiles would become the architects of a new age. Evolution would refine them, stretch their bones, lengthen their strides. The ground that once only trembled with wind would soon echo with footsteps, slow at first, then thunderous. The breath of the earth would find new voices, roars, hisses, songs of dominance and survival. But that time was still to come. For now, the world remained gentle, green, damp, alive with the quiet pulse of creation. The earth, once silent, now sighed beneath a canopy of leaves. The air shimmered with unseen possibility. In that silence before thunder, the stage was set. The forests inhaled sunlight and exhaled destiny. Each fern was a prelude, each breeze a promise. And far in the distance of time, evolution waited, holding its breath for the age of giants to begin. The earth, once a barren ember adrift in the dark, had remembered how to breathe. And in that breath, life found its first language. Before claws carved the soil and wings touched the wind, the earth's greatest mysteries drifted beneath the waves. The ocean, vast, dark, and infinite, was the first kingdom, the first cradle of breath. It was here, in silence deeper than mountains and older than stars, that life learned to move. The sea has always known secrets that land can only dream of. It remembers every shimmer of dawn, every shadow that ever passed across its surface. Even now, when waves kiss the shores of our modern world, they carry whispers from a time before continents had names. It was an age when the planet's heartbeat pulsed through water, not through air, when the ocean itself was the bloodstream of the earth. Imagine it, 400 million years ago. There were no birds in the sky, no forests to sway in the wind. Only a planet wrapped in mist and ocean, the surface broken by volcanic islands, steaming with new creation. The sun shone faintly through, clouds of carbon, its light refracting like stained glass through endless water. And in that dim cathedral, life stirred, soft, curious, and eternal. Tiny creatures floated among currents, their bodies translucent, their movements slow and deliberate. They had no eyes to see, yet they felt the rhythm of the tides, the pull of the moon across their fragile forms. The sea cradled them, rocked them gently in its patient hands. Each breath they took was the first rehearsal of something far greater, the first hint of lungs that would one day roar beneath alien skies. Over time, these simple lives began to grow armor, shells, scales, teeth, inventions of survival sculpted by invisible laws. Evolution was not a plan but a song. Each adaptation a new verse, each extinction a pause before the next refrain. Trilobites crawled along the seabed like armored ghosts, and nautiloids drifted through the depths, their spiral shells glowing faintly in filtered sunlight. The ocean had begun to dream of giants. Those dreams deepened in the Devonian Age, the age of fishes. The sea, swollen with oxygen from the forests that now breathed on land, became fertile ground for transformation. Fish of every shape and wonder appeared. Some grew fins that flared like sails, others developed jaws that could crush bone. The oceans shimmered with scales of silver and gold, light scattering like fire through glass. Here, predators became art. Dunkleosteus, a leviathan of bone and muscle, ruled the seas. Its armored skull could shatter anything that dared swim beside it. Sharks, sleek and ancient, glided through coral cathedrals as silent kings, and above them smaller fish darted like sparks, life endlessly inventing ways to stay alive. But within these watery empires, something miraculous stirred. A few creatures began to glance upward toward the dim line of light that marked the world above. Fins grew stronger, tails shorter, bones adapted for more than swimming. They began to bear weight. In those slow moments of curiosity, life considered something no creature had before: to leave the water behind. The first amphibians were awkward, fragile, trembling things. They emerged onto muddy shores with the clumsiness of infants learning to walk. Yet with each movement, they carried an entire ocean within them. The memory of salt, the rhythm of waves, the chemistry of breath. The sea did not lose them, it extended itself through them. Every heartbeat they carried was the ocean's echo, and still beneath the surface the giants dreamed on. The oceans were alive with hunger and grace, beauty and terror intertwined. Coral reefs spread like living cities, glowing in 1,000 colors. Sea scorpions the size of humans hunted in. Shallow waters and ammonites drifted like floating lanterns, tracing patterns through the dark. In the deep abyss, where sunlight had never touched, stranger things bloomed. Creatures with eyes like mirrors and bodies that pulsed with their own light. They were the whispers of creation itself, reminders that life does not need light to dream. The ocean was a mind without borders, imagining every possibility the universe could offer. The tides, governed by the distant moon, became the metronome of evolution. Twice a day, the sea reached out and withdrew, sculpting coastlines and feeding new worlds. That rhythm became a lesson in patience, a reminder that progress often comes not in leaps, but in waves. When the continents began to shift and drift, the oceans changed with them. New currents formed, climates shifted, and with each geological heartbeat, new species rose and fell. The Earth's story was not one of dominance, but of dance, a slow, endless exchange between what was and what could be. And through it all, the sea remembered. Even as the first forests grew tall, even as reptiles began to crawl across dry ground, the ocean continued its quiet dreaming. It had seen extinction and rebirth, fire and frost, silence and symphony. It was both mother and grave, beginning and end. Perhaps it is still dreaming now. Every wave a thought, every tide a breath. The ocean carries memory not in words, but in rhythm. The same rhythm that once lifted tiny fins toward air still moves within you. Your blood, your tears, the very chemistry of your being, all are echoes of that ancient sea. When you stand beside the shore and watch the moon pull the waves, you are not looking at something separate from yourself. You are witnessing your origin, the first motion that led to every heartbeat, every breath, every thought. The ocean was your first ancestor, and its dreams are written into your veins. In time, those dreams would take form on land. Scales would thicken, limbs would lengthen, teeth would sharpen, the whisper of water would become the roar of thunder. And from that ancient sea, through fire and evolution, the giants would finally rise. The earth had breathed through its forests. Now it had dreamed through its oceans. And soon it would awaken into an age where the ground itself would tremble with life. Long before the first feather touched the wind, the sky was a quiet sea, vast, untamed, and waiting. It had watched for ages as creatures ruled below, fins slicing through water, claws carving through soil. The heavens had been a mirror, too, the earth's restlessness, reflecting volcanoes, storms, and stars alike. But there came a time when life looked upward, and the sky, once only an audience, became a stage. The first flyers were not born with grace. They came from the lineages of wanderers who once crawled and hunted in the shadows of giant trees. Scales still clung to their skin, bones still heavy from their time below. But something ancient within them stirred, a longing not for survival, but for transcendence. It began with gliders, small reptiles leaping from high branches, catching the air for only a heartbeat before falling again. Yet even in those brief moments of freedom, something miraculous was born. Nature had found a new direction to evolve toward, the art of flight. Over millions of years, bones hollowed, limbs lengthened and stretched into wings, scales shimmered into feathers, each one a fragment of air woven into living form. Eyes sharpened to see horizons, and hearts grew stronger to keep rhythm with the wind. The sky had begun to fill with motion, a slow awakening that would forever change the music of the earth. The pterosaurs were the first sovereigns of this new realm. With wingspans stretching longer than small houses, they rose from cliffside nests and swept across newborn coastlines. Their shadows fell over seas and forests alike, moving storms of muscle and instinct. They were not gentle, but they were magnificent creatures sculpted from the very hunger of the wind. Below, the forest trembled in awe. Leaves shivered beneath the downdraft of ancient wings, and the air filled with the cries of creatures newly aware of the heavens above. To witness such movement was to see the impossible made real. The earth had long known how to crawl, how to swim, how to walk, but now it had learned how to soar. The air itself became a teacher. It rewarded balance, punished haste, and shaped the evolution of every creature daring enough to leave the ground. The sky was a sculptor, carving bodies out of persistence and grace. It taught wings to tilt, feathers to flex, and instincts to listen to the quiet music of the wind. From these lessons, new species arose, small, agile, and curious. Some darted through the air to escape predators, others learned to glide in pursuit of food. The atmosphere, once empty, became alive with whispers of motion. It was a delicate ballet of survival, painted across an endless blue. Then one lineage, fragile, feathered, and unassuming, would perfect the art that began with falling. From scaled ancestors came creatures of impossible beauty. The first birds. Their bones were poems written by evolution, their wings verses of resilience. Feathers shimmered with sunlight, each one a brush stroke of gold and silver, soft yet stronger than bone. These birds became living metaphors of the earth's own longing, to rise, to move beyond boundaries, to transform. They carried the ancient memory of the ocean in their blood and the forest's breath in their lungs, but their hearts belonged to the sky. When they took flight, the world itself seemed to exhale. Imagine the first morning when a creature truly flew, not glided, not fell, but flew. The dawn spread across prehistoric jungles like molten light, and from the treetops came the fluttering sound of something utterly new. A leap, a beat of wings, a defiance of gravity. In that instant, the sky was no longer empty. It had learned to sing, the world responded. Winds changed their patterns, clouds formed new dances, and even predators below began to look upward, bewildered by the sight of motion, unbound by land or sea. The atmosphere, once indifferent, now became alive with purpose. Flying was not merely survival, it was art. The sky turned into a realm of experiments, some graceful, some catastrophic. Gigantic wings sometimes failed, and bodies fell. But nature does not mourn failure, it builds from it. Every crash was a lesson, every feather shed became a seed for improvement. As ages passed, the air grew busier. From gentle gliders to hunters of the wind, life filled every corner of the sky. Birds with beaks sharp as blades dove from heights where even clouds hesitated to linger. Others skimmed over water, their wingtips touching the reflection of stars. Each flight was an act of remembering, a connection to the ancient ocean below, where movement had first been born. The same rhythm that guided the tides now pulsed within wings. The same breath that once filled coral caves now whispered through feathers. Even now the sky's first flyers are gone, their bones turned to fossils, and their songs long vanished. But every bird alive today carries a fragment of their dream, the unbroken lineage of ambition that began when the earth looked up and wondered. Flight is not only motion through air, it is the continuation of an ancient yearning, the universe exploring itself through the pulse of life. When you watch a bird glide across the horizon, you are seeing 4 billion years of persistence distilled into a single motion. You are watching the earth remember how to be weightless again. The sky, once empty, became home. It learned to cradle storms, to shape migrations, to paint sunsets across the wings of travelers. It became a map of memory where each gust and current tells a story older than human language. And perhaps that is why, even today, we look upward when we dream. Somewhere deep within our bones, still made from the dust of stars, still carrying the salt of the sea, we remember what it meant to rise. Because once, long ago, when the world was young and full of daring, the earth looked toward the heavens and whispered a promise. Someday I will fly. And so it did. The earth was restless again. The air grew heavy with heat. The soil pulsed with quiet violence, and the sky carried the scent of storms. From the deep lungs of volcanoes, continents exhaled smoke. The ground trembled as if remembering the heartbeat of creation itself. It was in this world of roaring fire and rising mountains that titans were born, the rulers of a realm that would come to be called the Kingdom of Thunder. They did not appear all at once. Evolution is not a flash of light, but a slow, burning candle, its glow spreading, reshaping, remaking. First came the small wanderers, lizard-like creatures with uncertain steps and sharp instincts. But generation after generation, they grew larger, stronger, more certain of the world they walked upon. They learned to command the land as if it had always belonged to them. These were the first dinosaurs, children of an earth that had finally caught its breath after eons of chaos. With every heartbeat, They echoed the rhythm of a planet still forming. Bones grew thick as trees. Claws dug deep into the fertile mud. Eyes sharpened to catch the flicker of prey in the long grass. Every movement, every roar, every footstep was a declaration. The age of giants had begun. The forests of that era were cathedrals of green. Ferns stretched taller than houses, and conifers reached toward the sun like ancient spires. Mist clung to the air, wrapping the trees in veils of gold and shadow. Across these primeval jungles, the dinosaurs moved with thunder in their steps. Some were colossal and serene, creatures whose very size seemed to defy gravity's pull. The sauropods, long-necked and endless, swept their heads through the canopy like living mountains. With each breath, they consumed the light, reshaping the forests that fed them. To see one move was to witness the slow grace of eternity. Others ruled with ferocity, predators whose roars cracked the silence of dawn. The great carnivores, built of muscle and patience, hunted with a precision the earth had never seen. They were not cruel, they were necessary. Every chase, every kill was a thread in nature's vast design. The world itself seemed to revolve around these titans. Their footfalls became the earth's heartbeat, their migrations its tides. Rivers curved around their paths and winds shifted to carry their scent. When they gathered to drink beneath a volcanic horizon, the ground seemed to bow beneath their weight. Lightning split the sky above them. Thunder rolled through the valleys. It was as though the heavens themselves were applauding their existence. Each storm a celestial drumbeat echoing the rhythm of life below. But even in their might, there was balance. For every hunter there was prey. For every roar, a silence that followed. Life in the kingdom of thunder was not endless war, but eternal equilibrium. Each creature played its part in a harmony too vast for human comprehension. In this world, time moved differently. A single storm might last for days, washing over forests with rains that carved rivers from stone. Seasons came and went like dreams, warm, wet, endless. And through it all, the dinosaurs lived not in chaos, but in continuity. Their world was not static, but steady, like the slow turning of the planet itself. To the earth, they were not monsters. They were expressions of balance, living answers to gravity, hunger, and light. The same forces that shaped stars had sculpted these beings from mud and breath. When the thunder rolled, it was not a warning, but a hymn, a reminder that creation still spoke through sound and storm. And so the age of giants endured. For millions of years, the kingdom of thunder stretched across the continents, from steaming jungles to endless plains, from mountain ridges to the quiet shores of newborn seas. Life was abundant, almost arrogant in its strength. The earth had reached a kind of perfection, an equilibrium between chaos and calm, yet even then, whispers of change moved through the wind. The world beneath their feet was restless again. Continents drifted slowly apart, as if the very skin of the planet was rearranging itself. Volcanoes continued their silent labor, painting the skies red and gold. Oceans shifted, climates changed, and still the giants roamed, unaware that every step was bringing them closer to an ending written long before their beginning. At night, when the storms rested and the stars watched from above, the earth grew quiet. The same stars that had witnessed the birth of galaxies now gazed down upon the moving shadows of dinosaurs. Beneath that cosmic gaze, life shimmered in its purest form. Wild, massive, and unashamed of its power. If you could have stood there then, amid the deep forests and the echo of thunder, you would have felt the pulse of creation itself. The ground would tremble beneath your feet, not in fear, but in awe. You would have seen eyes glinting through the mist, ancient, intelligent in their own primeval way, aware of a world that needed no language to exist. And perhaps you would have realized something profound, that life, in its grandest forms, is never truly separate from the elements that birthed it. The dinosaurs were not conquerors of nature, they were its expression. The thunder was not above them, but within them, even now, long after their bones turned to stone and their echoes faded into myth. The kingdom of thunder still lives. In every storm that rolls across the horizon, in every mountain shaped by ancient fire, in the deep tremor that runs through the heart of the earth when it dreams. Because the earth never forgets its titans. It remembers them in the way rivers carve through rock, in the way lightning splits the sky in the slow, patient rhythm of creation itself. And though the giants are gone, their legacy continues, not just in fossils or echoes, but in us. In every heartbeat there is thunder. In every breath, a memory of the creatures that once ruled the earth's endless symphony. For they were not merely beasts of muscle and bone. They were the earth made visible, alive, and magnificent. They were thunder walking. Long after the kingdom of thunder had fallen silent, the earth began to hum a different kind of song. It was softer now, slower, a melody buried beneath stone and shadow. The giants that once shook the ground had vanished, but their echoes remained, not in sound but in form. Bones, scattered and sleeping beneath the weight of time, became the silent instruments of a new symphony, a music played not for ears, but for eternity. In the quiet layers of the planet's crust, every fossil rests like a note pressed into parchment. The earth keeps them not as relics, but as memories. Each bone is a sentence, each imprint a syllable in the story of life. Together, they compose a language of patience, a rhythm only the universe could understand. Imagine for a moment a world where time does not rush, where years gather like dust upon the air, and every heartbeat stretches across centuries. In that silence, the bones of long-dead creatures whisper to one another. A femur remembers the thunder of footsteps. A ribcage recalls the breath of wind across a primeval plain. A single tooth glints faintly in the dark, dreaming of the prey that once trembled before it. The earth listens. It always has. The pressure of rock, the slow crawl of sediment, the patient wait of ages. These are not forces of destruction, but preservation. Fossilization is the universe's way of keeping promises. It tells the story of what once was and what might be again. For millions of years, these bones lay in silence, buried beneath layers of stone and time. Storms raged above, continents drifted apart, and new creatures rose to walk the land. But still, the old bones slept, untouched and unbroken, like musical notes waiting for a musician who had not yet been born. And then, one day humanity arrived. We were small, fragile things compared to the titans that came before us. Yet our curiosity was vast, a force no less powerful than thunder or fire. We dug into the earth not just to survive, but to understand. And when we uncovered the first fossil, it was as if we had stumbled upon a forgotten song. A bone pulled from the ground is not just an object. It is a voice, a message sent across millions of years, saying, "We were here. We lived. The earth remembers us." In those moments, science becomes poetry. Paleontology is not only about measuring and naming, it is about listening, hearing what the stones have been trying to tell us since time began. Each fossil we find changes the rhythm of our understanding. It reminds us that life is not a straight line, but a melody that rises and falls, repeats and transforms. The dinosaurs that once ruled the world were not failures of evolution. They were movements in a greater composition. When their song ended, another began. Mammals, birds, humans, all part of the same eternal score. But the true beauty lies in what those bones teach us about silence. In the gaps between what we know the imagination awakens. A single vertebra can inspire a world. A claw can summon the image of a hunt beneath a blood-red sun. A footprint can bring to life an entire ecosystem. The sound of insects, the rush of wind, the hiss of rain against ferns taller than houses. We are, in a way, composers ourselves. Each fossil we uncover becomes a note we play, reconstructing the lost music of the earth. Museums become concert halls of time. Beneath their lights, skeletons stretch into impossible shapes. Frozen motion captured in the geometry of bone. To stand before one is to feel the hum of something ancient still resonating through the ages. Yet for all our science and precision, there is a humility that lingers. No matter how many fossils we find, the full melody remains beyond reach. The earth never reveals the entire song, only fragments, hints, motifs. Perhaps that is how it should be. Mystery is part of the music. Without it, the tune would lose its wonder, and so we keep searching. Across deserts and cliffs, through dust and stone, we chase the faint echoes of that ancient orchestra. We listen for new harmonies buried in the dark. Bones of creatures yet unknown, chords that might change the key of our understanding. Each discovery adds a new phrase to the earth's eternal symphony, but beneath it all, there is a softer truth. The fossils we uncover do not belong to the past alone. They belong to the continuum of life, to the breath we take, the heartbeat we carry. The calcium in our bones is the same that once formed theirs. The atoms within us have been part of 1,000 different songs. The music of creation never stopped. It merely changed instruments. Perhaps that is why we feel awe in the presence of fossils. It is not just recognition, it is remembrance. Somewhere deep within us, our cells remember walking beneath thunder skies. They remember the rhythm of ancient tides, the weight of endless forests, the slow turning of time. When we gaze upon a dinosaur's skeleton, we are not just looking back, and we are looking inward, because in truth, we are part of the same composition. The same cosmic melody that began in the stars still hums within our blood. We are the latest verse of an ageless song, one that began long before words and will continue long after them. And so, when paleontologists dust away the earth from a fossilized skull or trace the outline of a bone with trembling fingers, they are not merely studying the past. They are playing a note, one that joins the grand harmony of existence. The earth listens, and for a brief moment the music rises again. Then the wind carries it away, as it always has. The bones return to silence, waiting for another listener. And the world turns, softly, as if keeping time before words, before memory. Before the human mind began to measure time, there were forests, vast and patient, older than any eye that would one day behold them. They grew upon the bones of ancient continents, stretching roots into volcanic soil and breathing the same air that had once carried the cries of giants. Their leaves shimmered with light, filtered through the fog of eons. In their quiet canopies, the history of the earth was written not in letters, but in rings and resin and the rhythm of renewal. When the dinosaurs ruled the land, these forests stood as sentinels. They did not fight nor flee. They simply witnessed. They watched as thunder-footed titans passed beneath their boughs, as claws tore through ferns, as storms rolled across the canopy like waves upon an ocean of green. Every sound, every roar, every crack of lightning, every shudder of the ground was absorbed into the silence that only trees understand. They had seen countless ages rise and fade. Long before the reign of reptiles, the forests had watched the first fish crawl from the sea and gasp at the light. They had felt the wind shift as continents drifted apart, the slow breathing of a planet rearranging its bones. They were older than bones themselves, older than the creatures that would turn into fossils. To stand among them was to stand inside the lungs of time. When the giants of the earth fed, they fed upon the forests. Leaves were torn, branches bent, trunks scarred by the weight of life too immense to imagine. Yet the trees did not resist. They yielded, bent, regrew. They understood what few beings ever would, that endurance, not strength, is the truest form of power. In their patience, they shaped the very world the dinosaurs inhabited. Their fallen trunks became rivers' paths. Their roots held the soil against the floods. When they burned, they seeded the next generation with the ashes of the old. They taught the planet how to renew itself. Life was their language. Balance was their gift. At dawn, mist drifted between their trunks like smoke from some forgotten fire. The air shimmered with spores and sunlight, the quiet hum of unseen insects. Great creatures moved through that haze like moving mountains, their scales brushing the leaves. When they passed, the trees whispered to one another, not in sound but in the subtle shifting of branches, the faint trembling of roots deep below. Even the greatest predators paused in their shadow. In the stillness of the forest, time seemed to slow. Here, the endless struggle for survival softened, replaced by the calm indifference of nature's rhythm. The dinosaurs were transient, but the forests were eternal. They measured life not in moments, but in millennia. Some trees were older than entire species. They had seen empires of creatures rise and vanish without so much as a broken twig left behind. Yet the forests remembered. They carried memory in their rings. Each layer a record of a season, a drought, a flood, a fire. If you could listen closely enough, you might hear them whisper the entire history of life on Earth. But their voices are deep, and their language requires silence to hear. When storms came, the sky would grow dark and restless. Rain fell like music, drumming on leaves and bark. Lightning struck, splitting trunks that had stood for centuries. But even in destruction there was beauty. Fire cleared the old, making space for the new. Out of blackened soil, green shoots would rise, delicate and defiant. Life never ended. It simply changed tempo. And through it all, the forests remained watchers. They saw the rise of new species, the slow shifts in climate, the endless dance between predator and prey. The Earth's symphony continued, and the trees were its quiet audience. Their applause measured in the steady release of breath, the unseen exchange of carbon and oxygen that kept the world alive. For millions of years, their roots intertwined with the veins of the planet. The minerals they drew from the soil became the bones of creatures yet unborn. Their fallen leaves nourished the insects that fed the amphibians that fed the reptiles that ruled the land. In every sense, the forests were the hidden heart of creation, unseen, uncelebrated, yet indispensable. But even they were not eternal. The forests changed as the world did. Some grew dense and tropical, where rain never ceased and vines wrapped around trunks like serpents. Others thinned into dry, fern-filled plains where herds could roam freely. And when the age of thunder began to fade, when ash began to fall from distant skies, the forests once again became witnesses to an ending. They felt the tremors before the sky grew dark. They smelled the ash before it fell. The first hints of catastrophe came not as sound, but as a deep vibration through the roots, a shiver that passed from one tree to another until the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Above, the creatures still grazed and hunted, unaware that the sky itself was preparing to burn. And when it happened, when the fire from heaven fell and the air grew thick with smoke, the forests burned like candles in the wind. Flames climbed their trunks, devouring bark and leaf and limb. The sky turned red, and the air became a song of crackling death. The trees that had watched for millions of years fell one by one, not in anger, but in surrender. But even then, their silence did not end. In their ashes, new forests would one day grow. Their carbon would become coal. Their wood would turn to stone. The memory of their lives would sink into the soil, waiting for another age to find it. And so, even now, every tree that sways in the wind carries within it the memory of those that came before. The forests that watched in silence have never truly disappeared. They live on in every breath of air, in every root that touches the dark, in every living thing that depends upon their ancient gift. Because the truth of the forests is simple and eternal. To live is to listen, to endure is to remember, and the earth, through its trees, remembers everything. In their stillness lies the wisdom of ages, and in their silence, the softest sound of life continuing. Before thunder walked the land and forests rose toward the sun, there was only the sea, vast, eternal, and awake. The oceans were the first dreamers, never closing their eyes, never pausing their breath. While mountains crumbled and continents drifted, the sea kept moving, restless and alive. Beneath its mirrored surface, light fractured into 1,000 shifting worlds, and in those worlds, life stirred. Slow at first, then endless. To gaze upon that ancient ocean would be to look into the pulse of the planet itself. Every current, every wave was a heartbeat of creation. The sea was both cradle and cathedral, its depths echoing with the first whispers of existence. Long before dinosaurs ruled the land, the ocean had already written its story, in scales, shells, and silent hunts that played out beneath a ceiling of shimmering blue. It was a world without sleep. The tides were constant, the rhythm unbroken. Even when night fell upon the surface, the deep glowed with its own kind of light. Cold, spectral, eternal. Strange creatures shimmered in the blackness, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescent fire. To them, darkness was not emptiness but home, a soft and endless horizon. The sea never needed the sun. It dreamed in colors the sky had never seen. In the upper layers, near the boundary where light met shadow, life flourished in abundance. Vast schools of fish glided as one, moving like liquid silver through the water. Each scale caught the light and sent it rippling in waves of living motion. Predators followed, sleek, ancient hunters with teeth like moonlight, slicing through the currents. Theirs was a chase that never truly ended, only changed form as the world evolved. Deeper still, silence reigned. There, the weight of water pressed, like the memory of time itself. Gigantic shadows drifted through the void, creatures with eyes large enough to catch the faintest flicker of light, jaws that opened wider than dreams. They were the rulers of the abyss, born in pressure and patience. Some swam slowly, deliberately, as though moving through thought itself. Others struck with blinding speed, flashes of movement vanishing into the dark. Between them flowed endless clouds of plankton and unseen life, the invisible threads that connected predator to prey, death to renewal. The sea, like the earth, had its own gravity, a pull not just of water, but of memory. Every drop had been part of something before, a tear, a rainstorm, a tide that once brushed the shore of a newborn continent. In its depths, nothing was ever lost, only transformed. Bones sank and turned to coral. Shells dissolved and fed the smallest of creatures. Even decay became creation. It was the ocean that taught life how to endure. Every heartbeat of a fish, every flick of a fin was a rehearsal for the lives that would one day walk the land. Muscles learned to stretch, lungs began to imagine air, and eyes once made only for darkness began to sense the promise of light. The sea carried all of evolution within its slow and patient current, and yet it never slept. When meteors struck the earth and mountains fell into the waves, the sea simply absorbed it all. Shockwaves, ash, fire. When the skies cleared, it remained, shimmering and calm, holding the memory of destruction in its depths. Even during the age of dinosaurs, when thunder echoed across the continents, the sea continued its endless vigil. While giants walked the land, leviathans ruled below. Massive reptiles with fins like sails and jaws that could crush stone moved through the deep in silent dominion. Ichthyosaurs darted through the shallows, their bodies built for speed, their eyes forever open. Plesiosaurs glided with slow grace, their long necks weaving through the dim green waters like serpents of myth. They were not monsters, only the ocean's reflections of power and beauty. The sea had always mirrored the sky, calm and violent, infinite and intimate. Its creatures carried within them the memory of stars, the chemistry of the cosmos, the same atoms that burned in suns and flowed through veins. When storms gathered, the surface turned wild, waves climbing high as cliffs, crashing with the sound of breaking worlds. But even in that chaos there was rhythm. The sea knew balance. It gave and took in equal measure, never wasting, never pausing. To those who could see it, truly see it, the ocean was not a body of water, but a consciousness. It dreamed through movement. It spoke in tides. Every wave was a question asked to the moon, and every returning tide an answer whispered back at night. When the stars reflected upon the still water, it was hard to tell where the heavens ended and the ocean began. Perhaps they were the same, one made of light, the other of memory, both infinite, both alive. When creatures died, their remains sank to the sea floor, where silt embraced them gently. There, among the bones and sand, time slowed almost to a stop. Fossils formed like hymns in stone, preserving the shape of movement itself. Each skeleton resting beneath the waves was another note in the earth's great song, the same symphony that once played on land, now resonating below. And though ages passed, and land creatures rose, and skies filled with wings, the sea remained. It did not envy the land, for it had its own dominion, a realm too deep to conquer, too vast to claim. Even now the ocean remembers. Every current carries the echo of ancient fins. Every wave that touches the shore brings with it the breath of creatures long gone. The sea has never forgotten its children. Perhaps that is why humans feel peace when standing by the ocean, why the sound of waves can lull even the restless heart. Somewhere within us, our blood remembers the rhythm of the tides. Our bodies, built of salt and water, still respond to the moon's pull. The sea never left us. It only changed shape, flowing through our veins instead of around our bones. And when we dream, perhaps it is the ocean that dreams through us, remembering its ancient stillness, its endless movement, its quiet watch over life and death. For the sea never slept. It only learned how to keep dreaming while awake. Far above the clouds, beyond the pull of the earth, the stars burned with patient light. Each one was a furnace of creation, a silent forge where the universe made its elements, then scattered them like seeds across eternity. Those seeds would one day become everything. The oceans that never slept, the forests that breathed the bones of giants, and even the quiet pulse of your own heart. If one were to look close enough, closer than any microscope or telescope could see, they'd find the truth shimmering beneath the surface of all life. That blood and starlight are made of the same thing. The iron flowing through veins, the calcium in bone, the oxygen that fills lungs. All of it was born in the heart of a dying star. Every creature that ever lived, from the smallest trilobite to the thunder-limbed dinosaurs, was carrying the memory of the cosmos inside them. Life, in its simplest form, was a reflection of the universe remembering itself. When the Earth was young, still cooling from its molten youth, meteorites fell like rain, bringing with them the ancient ingredients of existence: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, the four quiet architects of life. They mingled in the primordial seas, and from their slow conversation came the first whispers of biology. Molecules joined, divided, learned, adapted, and somewhere in that infinite patience, the first breath was drawn. A ripple of motion that would one day become the heartbeat of every living thing. From that first breath to the thunder of dinosaur lungs, evolution was a symphony of starlight learning to move. Cells became creatures, creatures became lineages, and those lineages became eras, each one a verse in the cosmic song of survival. Imagine it now, the blood of a massive sauropod flowing through veins as wide as rivers, its heart beating strong enough to send warmth up a neck longer than a house. Within every drop of that blood was iron forged in a supernova, travelling for billions of years, only to flow inside the body of a creature eating from the tops of trees. Every breath it took recycled the same air, once exhaled by volcanoes and ancient seas, shared by all who came before. The planet itself was a closed circuit of cosmic inheritance. Breath, blood, bone, they were the elements of memory. Even the dinosaurs, those giants who seemed so far from human, were closer to us than we imagine. The oxygen they inhaled was the same that still drifts through our skies. The stars that watched their world still burn above ours. And the calcium that made their skeletons strong now rests in the stones we uncover, whispering through fossilized time. Each creature carried the stars differently. The pterosaurs who ruled the sky held starlight in their hollow bones, light enough to float upon the wind. The armored ankylosaurs bore it in dense plates, glittering faintly under the sun. The marine reptiles, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, shimmered with it in scales that caught the dim green glow of underwater light. Starlight was not just what made them, but what guided them. It shimmered in the patterns of their instincts, in migration, in survival, in the soft, invisible pull that told them where to go and when. Even the smallest creature was connected to something vast, like a note in an endless melody at night when the great predators rested. The land must have felt like a mirror of the cosmos. Starlight above, starlight below, reflected in every pond, every eye, every breathing thing. And in that reflection the earth seemed almost aware, as if it knew that its life was the universe dreaming of itself. But starlight was not gentle. It was both creator and destroyer. The same cosmic energy that forged life also carried within it the power to end it. A balance held across aeons, creation at one edge, extinction at the other. Every breath was borrowed from that balance, every heartbeat a defiance of the void, and yet life endured. It did not simply survive, it learned to evolve, to shape itself anew. Each species that rose carried not just the atoms of the stars, but the stories of everything that had ever lived before it. Dinosaurs were the living archives of cosmic memory, walking, breathing constellations of matter that had once burned in distant suns. Perhaps that is why even now, when we uncover their bones, they seem to glow with an ancient reverence. Fossils are not dead things. They are translations of energy, starlight slowed down, made visible in stone. The curve of a rib, the spiral of a tooth, the hollow of an eye socket. All are signatures of a long conversation between the cosmos and time. Sometimes, when we hold a fossil in our hands, we are not just touching history. We are touching the stars themselves, reshaped into form, into memory, into meaning. And if we listen closely, we can almost hear what they remember. They remember warmth, the way sunlight felt on scales, the rhythm of breath as lungs filled beneath endless skies. They remember storms rolling across continents, still learning their shapes. They remember the pulse of the planet beneath their feet. That slow, eternal heartbeat that never stopped. And perhaps they remember, too, that they were never truly separate from the stars, only briefly embodied by Earth. Every creature that has ever lived has carried a spark of that truth, a quiet understanding that to live is to burn softly for a while, to hold light in a fragile body before returning it to the night. When we breathe, we are echoing the same rhythm that once filled the lungs of creatures long vanished. When we look at the stars, we are not looking outward. We are looking home, because what burns in the sky burns in us. The blood in our veins is the same fire that lights the galaxies. And long after we are gone, the atoms that were once our hearts will drift again through space, waiting to be called back into life, to breathe, to walk, to wonder once more. The cycle of blood, breath and starlight never ends. It only changes form, endlessly, quietly, beautifully. There are moments in Earth's story when everything seems to stop, not in silence, but in deep, measured stillness. Mountains stand unmoving beneath clouds that take centuries to pass. Continents drift so slowly that an entire age can unfold before a coastline changes. In these pauses between creation and destruction, time itself seems to hold its breath. The world after the reign of the great dinosaurs was not yet ready for what would come next. It was a planet caught in reflection, a living memory suspended in motion. The forests were still thick, the oceans still full, but the air carried a strange expectancy. The rhythm that had once thundered with the footsteps of giants began to slow, like the calm heartbeat of something vast, remembering how to rest. It was in this stillness that the earth began to heal itself. Volcanoes cooled. Rivers carved their quiet paths through plains of ash. The tectonic plates beneath the oceans shifted, ever so slightly, whispering to one another through pressure and heat. Entire continents drifted apart like slow-moving dreams, carrying forests, deserts, and the scattered remnants of the world that had been. To the planet, millions of years were the length of a sigh. It is almost impossible for the human mind to grasp the pace of deep time, the way seconds stretch into centuries and centuries dissolve into eons. In that immensity, life does not hurry. Evolution moves in invisible increments, sculpting existence with patience beyond measure. What seems static to us is, in truth, always becoming. In those epochs, the seas shimmered with delicate life. Ammonites spiraled in their shells. Soft corals waved gently beneath blue light. Forests stretched endlessly, their canopies layered like green oceans. New species emerged quietly in the shadows, small and cautious, as if aware of the ghosts that lingered from the age before. The earth, it seemed, was remembering how to breathe again. The giants had gone, but their bones rested beneath soil that now nourished life anew. Ferns grew from the dust of fallen titans. Streams traced their way over ancient fossils. What had once been thunder and roar became whisper and renewal. In that quietness, the pulse of time softened, and from that still rhythm, new forms began to emerge. It is easy to think of extinction as an ending, but in truth it is a breath between songs. The earth, like a heart, beats in cycles: creation, collapse, renewal. The fall of the dinosaurs was not a full stop, but a comma in a story too vast for human punctuation. With each extinction, the planet pauses, rebalances, and begins again. The silence that followed the Age of Thunder was fertile. It was the silence of transformation. The atmosphere began to clear. The sun returned in full warmth, its light once again touching every corner of the planet. Life, ever patient, reached upward to meet it. The surviving species adapted, thrived, filled the gaps left behind. Small mammals, once timid and hidden, began to wander more boldly. Birds, the living echoes of the dinosaurs, filled the skies with color and sound. The Earth's great clock ticked slowly, marking not minutes, but miracles. Each geological layer formed like a page pressed into stone. If we could flip through them, we'd see not chaos, but continuity, a rhythm of evolution pulsing softly beneath every catastrophe. The planet was never truly destroyed. It only changed its skin. Even as the continents drifted, Gondwana fracturing, Laurasia spreading apart, the core of the Earth remained constant. Deep beneath the crust, molten rivers still moved in cycles older than the moon's light. That same energy had birthed volcanoes, built mountains, and guided the slow ballet of tectonic plates. To the planet, these motions were not destruction. They were breath. Expansion and contraction, erosion and uplift, decay and bloom. Every living thing was a reflection of that cosmic rhythm. Dinosaurs had lived in the quickened heartbeat of youth. Now the planet entered its slow exhale, its long meditation. If one stood in those days, on a plain where the wind moved like water and the air shimmered with heat, time would feel thick. Days might seem endless. The world felt ancient yet freshly born, vast yet intimate. Every sound, the chirp of a bird, the whisper of leaves, was part of a quieter, older symphony. The stars, too, bore witness to this long patience. They had watched continents form, collide, and drift apart before. They had seen the rise and fall of species countless times. To them, this slowing of Earth's pulse was neither tragedy nor triumph, merely another breath in the infinite rhythm of existence. And yet, even within that vast indifference, something deeply beautiful was taking shape. In the soil, tiny creatures thrived, insects, amphibians, small mammals, all writing the next verse of evolution in fragile lives. The balance of the planet shifted from the massive to the minute. Survival no longer belonged to size or strength, but to adaptability. The Earth had changed its rules, and the next players were learning them in silence. Time was no longer measured by footsteps of giants, but by the flutter of wings. Each dawn brought a world slightly different from the one before. Seeds fell, sprouted, decayed, and rose again. Rivers redrew their paths. Mountains weathered into sand. It was not a time of noise, but of persistence, and persistence, not power, is what keeps life eternal. The Earth was teaching that lesson quietly, showing that endurance comes not from defiance, but from harmony, that to survive is to move with time, not against it. And so, while the great continents wandered, the oceans shimmered, and new skies took shape. The planet turned, slowly, gently, as it always had. Millions of years passed like breaths. The world changed its colors. The rhythm of time, once slowed to a whisper, began to stir again. From that stillness, new voices would rise, creatures of light, of flight, of thought. But for now, the Earth simply breathed. Because sometimes, even a planet must rest before it dreams again. There comes a night in every great story when the sky forgets its gentleness. For hundreds of millions of years, the Earth had moved in calm rhythm, continents drifting, forests murmuring, oceans breathing. But on one fateful evening, that stillness fractured. The heavens blazed with a light so fierce it silenced the stars. It began far from human memory, in the cold emptiness beyond Mars. A rock, ancient and indifferent, had wandered space for eons. It spun slowly, a fragment of forgotten creation, until the pull of gravity caught it. It was drawn not by will, but by the simple mathematics of fate. An arc that would end on a blue planet already alive with life and sound and colour. If one could have stood on the surface then, the night would have looked ordinary, a soft twilight settling over tropical forests, the air warm, the scent of ferns thick and alive. The last of the great dinosaurs might have raised their heads at the strange brightness growing in the sky. A few seconds later, that light would have become the final sunrise they ever saw. The asteroid entered the atmosphere at more than 70,000 kilometers per hour. The air around it turned white hot, searing brighter than any sunbeam. And then, in a moment too brief for thought, it met the Earth. The impact tore open the crust of the planet with the energy of billions of atomic bombs. Mountains turned to vapor. Oceans boiled. Forests hundreds of miles away were flattened by waves of air that moved faster than sound. Everything the dinosaurs had known, their lands, their skies, their rhythm of life, ended in less than an hour. The crater it left, near the Yucatan Peninsula, a wound now called Chicxulub, stretched more than 150 kilometers wide. It was not just a hole in the earth, but a doorway through which time itself would change. The first wave of fire swept outward, igniting forests as far as the horizon reached. Trees exploded, rivers turned to steam. The second wave came from the sky, molten rock hurled upward and falling back like fiery rain. The air thickened with glass and dust. Sunlight vanished behind a curtain of ash. The temperature plummeted. It was as if the planet itself had forgotten how to breathe. The dinosaurs, magnificent rulers of a world they had shaped for over 160 million years, were undone not by weakness, but by the cold precision of cosmic chance. Those two near the impact vanished instantly, burned into memory. Those farther away felt the world darken day by day, the plants dying first, then the creatures that fed upon them. Yet even in destruction there was a strange beauty, the terrible beauty of cosmic order. The asteroid had not come with malice. It was simply a messenger carrying change. In the great equation of existence, endings are never separate from beginnings. The Earth entered a long night. For months, perhaps years, sunlight could not reach the surface. The dust that filled the atmosphere dimmed the world into a twilight that never lifted. The plants ceased to grow. The oceans cooled. Across continents, silence took root. This was not the silence of peace, but of transformation. The age of thunder had ended. Yet beneath that darkness, the pulse of the planet still beat. Lava flowed deep underground, unseen but alive. Tiny creatures burrowed into soil, still warm from fire, seeking refuge. In the deepest seas, where light had never mattered, life continued. Slow, patient, waiting for the dawn that would one day return. When at last the skies began to clear, the world that emerged was no longer the same. The forests that had once stretched endlessly were gone. The air carried new scents, minerals, ash, the faint sweetness of renewal. The earth had been purified by catastrophe, reshaped for what would come next. It is easy, from our distance in time, to see this event as tragedy. But if we listen closely to the rhythm of nature, we hear something else, an understanding older than life itself. In the death of giants, the seeds of tomorrow were planted. Without that night of falling fire, there would be no mammals to inherit the earth, no birds to paint the skies with flight, No humans to look up and wonder why the stars sometimes fall. The extinction was also an opening, a passage through which life would evolve towards something new, something more aware, more fragile, more curious. Even in the darkest hours, creation never stops breathing. The dinosaurs' world turned to ash, but within that ash the earth began dreaming again. The winds carried nutrients from burned forests to the oceans, feeding plankton that shimmered like living dust. The clouds that once choked the skies began to thin, and the sun returned, faint at first, then golden, spilling across the quiet remains of a changed planet. Imagine that sunrise, the first after years of darkness. The air still cool, the horizon lined with mist rising from the seas. The earth, scarred but living, turning once more beneath the eternal light. In that glow, something new stirred. Small creatures crept from burrows, blinking at the warmth. They carried no memory of thunder or flame, only the instinct to move forward. Their tiny hearts beat with the same rhythm that had once moved the giants. Proof that life, in its simplest form, endures everything. The night of falling fire had rewritten existence, but it had not ended it. If one could listen closely enough, one might hear, deep within the stones of Chicxulub, the echo of that moment, not of destruction, but of renewal. A heartbeat slowed but not stopped, a pulse dimmed but not lost, and above the stars remained, silent witnesses to the story below. They had seen this pattern countless times across galaxies, life blooming, falling, and blooming again. To them, the Earth's fire was but another flicker in the endless rhythm of creation. When the planet finally settled and the dust drifted down like soft snow, the first quiet of morning returned. The world exhaled. The oceans shimmered once more, and from that calm after the fire, the next chapter of life began to write itself. One heartbeat, one breath, one fragile miracle at a time. When dawn finally came, it did not bring light. The sky remained heavy and bruised, as if mourning what had been lost. The sun was there, somewhere above the ash, but its warmth could no longer touch the earth. The air hung thick with soot, the colour of burnt stone, and even the winds moved slowly, burdened by grief. The day the earth wept, smoke was not a single day at all. It was an age of aftermath. A long and aching silence stretched over decades. The world had been remade in an instant, and now it had to learn how to live again. Forests that once whispered with the movement of giant tails and wings now stood as blackened skeletons. The oceans, darkened by dust and falling debris, reflected no sky. The rivers carried ashes instead of life. If the asteroid's impact was a scream, then this was the echo, deep, low, and unending. The rain came first. It was not gentle. It fell heavy and dark, mixed with soot and the tears of the atmosphere. The clouds that circled the planet carried not water, but memory. The memory of fire, the residue of vaporized stone. As the rain fell, it hissed against the scorched earth, cooling molten rock, washing carbon into the sea. It was as if the planet were cleansing itself, drop by drop, from the fever that had nearly ended it. Beneath the oceans, shock waves still rippled through the crust. Volcanoes awoke like sleepers startled from dreams. The world trembled, not in fear, but in renewal. Every eruption, every plume of smoke that reached into the dim sky was part of a greater exhale. The earth was breathing out what it could no longer hold within. The sky grew darker before it grew clear. For years, sunlight was a rumor told by the wind. Photosynthesis slowed to a crawl. Entire species of plants vanished, unable to catch even the faintest thread of light. Without the plants, the herbivores faded. Without the herbivores, the predators starved. It was a slow unraveling, a chain of endings too patient to be seen but too immense to be stopped. And yet, in that unraveling, something tender began. The world's smallest survivors, the creatures that had hidden beneath soil, within bark or underwater, began to emerge. Mammals, no larger than a hand, crept through the soot-covered ferns. Insects fluttered weakly in the dim glow. Life had been stripped to its simplest form, and in that simplicity it began again. In the days of smoke, every breath was an act of endurance. The air itself was heavy, full of carbon and dust, but where one life fell, another adapted. Tiny leaves evolved to drink from shadows. Creatures learned to dig deeper to find warmth underground. The surface of the earth became quiet, but beneath it, the pulse of life persisted. If the planet could have spoken then, its voice would not have been despair. It would have been tired, yes, but also wise, aware that endings and beginnings share the same breath. The smoke did not fall evenly. In some places, entire continents remained shrouded for decades. In others, small patches of light broke through. These sanctuaries became the seeds of the new world, oases of resilience from which life would slowly bloom again. Evolution began to rewrite itself, line by line, in the language of survival. The mammals grew bolder. They scavenged in twilight, found warmth in the remains of ancient trees, hunted in silence. They did not yet know they were heirs to a lost kingdom. To them, the world was simply what it had become: dim, cold, and full of promise. Even the oceans, blackened by ash, began to shimmer once more. Deep currents circulated nutrients from the destroyed surface, feeding plankton that multiplied in the darkness. These microscopic survivors were the architects of oxygen, the silent makers of breath. Through them, the air began to clear, almost imperceptibly at first, a molecule of hope at a time. In this slow awakening, Earth's grief turned to patience. The smoke began to lift, and with it, the light returned. The first sunrise after those long years must have been a quiet miracle. Weak rays breaking through grey clouds, glinting on the bones of a fallen world. The land, scarred and cracked, gleamed faintly, as if remembering colour. What once was death, now fed new life. The ash, rich in minerals, nourished the soil. Seeds that had lain dormant sprang awake. Ferns unfurled their tender green spirals through the black dust, moss-covered stone. In time, forests would rise again, softer and smaller perhaps, but carrying the same promise that had always guided the planet: the will to live. The Earth's smoke did not mark its ending. It was the slow exhale of something vast recovering from a wound, and as it healed, new voices began to whisper in the silence. The call of a bird, a true descendant of the fallen dinosaurs, echoed across the empty plains. Its wings caught the new light, glinting gold against the grey horizon. It was not morning, it was beginning. Perhaps this is how all worlds survive, by remembering how to turn pain into motion, by allowing destruction to compost into renewal, by trusting that even in the thickest smoke, the memory of light endures. The Earth has always known this truth. Long before us, it learned how to grieve and grow at once. If you could stand on that recovering world, you would see beauty where tragedy once lay. The ocean steaming gently beneath the warming air, the soil breathing again, the faint shimmer of green returning to the land. Every horizon carrying the ghost of what was and the seed of what will be. In the distance, the great crater still glowed faintly with heat, a wound and a womb at once. It was both grave and birthplace, the mark of the moment when the old Earth died and the new one began. And as the winds carried the last smoke into the far reaches of the sky, the planet turned steady as ever toward the next dawn. The sun, patient and eternal, waited above the haze, ready to begin again, because even planets, when they weep, are only washing away what no longer serves their becoming. Silence has a way of stretching, of wrapping itself around the world until even the memory of sound feels distant. After the fire had burned out and the last ember sank into cold ash, the earth fell into a deep, dreamless quiet, the kind of stillness that makes time lose its shape. Days and nights blended into one long breath, slow, uncertain, but alive. The oceans no longer roared. Their waves moved like sleeping lungs, rising and falling with a strange tenderness. The air, once heavy with soot and grief, began to thin. Ash settled into the soil, dark and fertile, and the forests, what remained of them, stood motionless, their blackened silhouettes reaching upward like prayers carved from smoke. In that silence, the earth listened. It listened to the cracks cooling in the rocks, to the slow drip of melted stone becoming clay, to the faint rustle of wind carrying whispers from one desolate plain to another. It was not the silence of death, it was the silence before music. The pause that comes when the world holds its breath before it dares to sing again. Deep beneath the surface, where the fires had not reached, life hid. Tiny creatures burrowed through soil still warm from the planet's fever. In the dark, where no sunlight touched, they waited. They did not know what had happened, only that the world above had gone still. But even in the black, they kept moving, eating, breathing, remembering what it meant to exist. Sometimes silence is not emptiness. It is incubation. The quiet that followed was a womb of time. For hundreds of years, there were no great beasts, no titans shaking the ground, only wind and water and the faint rhythm of survival. The world was relearning its own heartbeat. Slowly, the haze in the sky began to thin. Shafts of weak sunlight filtered through, thin as threads, but enough. They touched the oceans first, glittering faintly across rippling waves, and for the first time in what felt like eternity, colour began to return. Pale blues shimmered where once there had been black. The air grew lighter. Rain fell clean again. And in the soil, nourished by the ashes of everything that came before, the first green tendrils began to emerge. They were fragile, thin, trembling things, but they carried the memory of resilience written into their veins. Ferns unfurled like sighs. Moss softened the edges of ancient craters. Wherever sunlight lingered for more than a moment, life followed. The silence filled with subtle movement. Insects crept across the damp ground, tracing paths between drops of dew. Tiny mammals emerged from burrows, blinking against the pale dawn. They scavenged what little there was. Roots, seeds, the remnants of what had fallen from the sky long ago. Every breath they took, every cautious step, was a quiet rebellion against extinction. If you could walk through that world, you might think it barren. But look closer. You would see the first sparks of something sacred returning. A single leaf pushing through soot. The glint of water carving new rivers. The faint shimmer of stars reflected on still ponds. The earth was healing in silence, the way a wound closes beneath a bandage, unseen but certain. The oceans sang again, though softly now, not in thunderous waves, but in gentle murmurs. Tides lapped at the edges of newly formed shores, reshaping continents grain by grain. The smell of salt returned to the wind, and though no eyes had yet learned to weep, the planet itself seemed to exhale in relief. Even the sky began to change. The thick grey veil that had hidden the stars started to dissolve. For the first time in an age, the constellations shone again. Their light fell on a world reborn from silence, smaller, humbler, but alive. There is something beautiful about the way the universe repairs itself. It does not rush. It simply allows. The quiet that followed the fire was not an ending, but a meditation. A long pause between heartbeats where the earth considered its own survival. It remembered the songs of forests and the rumble of creatures long gone. It remembered warmth and light, and somewhere in its deep, molten core, it began to hum again. The low, steady vibration of persistence. In this era of hush, the planet seemed to dream. The continents shifted slightly, seeking balance. Mountains rose from beneath the sea, slow and solemn. Lakes filled the craters of impact, reflecting a new sky. Each drop of rain that fell carried both grief and renewal, a mingling of endings and beginnings, as inseparable as shadow and dawn. And then slowly, sound returned. The first birds, small, feathered remnants of ancient giants, broke the silence. Their songs were soft, almost hesitant, as if the world itself needed time to remember how to listen. Their voices echoed through the empty valleys, a promise that life would not only survive, but sing again. The wind joined them. It brushed through young ferns, across still waters, through canyons carved by centuries of quiet endurance. The earth, once still, now murmured with the faint rhythm of motion. Every sound was small, the patter of rain, the hum of insects, the rustle of leaves. Yet together they wove a new kind of music, a quieter symphony, but no less sacred. The earth no longer thundered with the steps of giants or burned with celestial fire. It breathed softly now, content in its stillness. The silence had taught it something profound, that rebirth does not come in chaos, but in calm. And so, in the quiet that followed, the planet rested. The stars watched over it. The moon, patient and pale, guided the tides. And from the edges of this serenity, life gathered strength, preparing for its next great leap. Because silence, in the end, is never the final word. It is the inhale before creation, the stillness that makes room for everything that will come next. Soon, the small would rise, the gentle would inherit the earth and the world. At last, would remember how to sing again. In the stillness that followed extinction, when the smoke had thinned and the sun returned timidly to the wounded sky, life hid in shadows. It did not roar or thunder as it once did. It whispered, it crept. It began again from the smallest of heartbeats. Beneath the broken canopy of a cooling world, tiny creatures stirred, fragile bodies shaped by endurance rather than might. They were the inheritors of silence, the unseen custodians of all that remained. Small mammals, no bigger than a child's hand, scurried through the ruins of fallen trees and ash-covered ferns. Their fur was thin, their hearts fast, and their eyes bright with the old instinct to survive. In burrows carved into the earth's softened skin, they had waited through the long winter of fire. Some fed on roots and seeds buried deep enough to escape the flames. Others licked moisture from stone, their small lungs learning to breathe air thick with dust and memory. Against all odds they endured, not through strength, but through stillness. The age of giants was gone. The age of the small had begun. They were quiet things, these survivors, shy, deliberate, patient. But in their tiny bones was written the resilience of everything that had ever lived. They carried the ancient code, the secret song of DNA that had outlasted storms, fire, and cosmic chance. Every heartbeat was an echo of the first spark that had once danced in the ocean's cradle. The earth watched them tenderly. After all its violence, it had become a gentler place. The forests were still sparse, the skies pale with recovering light, but the soil was rich again, thick with ash and potential. From that fertile darkness, shoots of green pushed upward, fragile yet insistent. Moss covered the cracks in stone, and streams began to murmur where glaciers melted into the sea. In that reborn world, the small creatures found sanctuary. They learned the art of adaptation, a sacred patience that giants had never needed. Their bodies changed with the rhythm of the seasons, their senses sharpened with necessity. They learned to climb, to burrow, to hide, to listen. And through them, evolution began its slow, invisible work. Time once again became the sculptor. Thousands of years passed like the slow breathing of the earth. With each dawn, new variations appeared. A longer snout here, a keener ear there. Tiny claws for digging, sharper teeth for foraging. The dance of adaptation was quiet but unstoppable. In the shelter of roots and hollow logs, the small learned to thrive where the mighty had fallen, and perhaps, in some instinctive way, the earth had chosen them. In the soft darkness of the forest floor, where decaying leaves whispered stories of long-dead titans, life began weaving itself anew. The first birds, distant descendants of ancient reptiles, flitted through the branches, fragile ghosts of a lineage once crowned with thunder. Their wings beat softly against the dawn, scattering sunlight like dust. In their flight was both remembrance and defiance. Meanwhile, beneath them, tiny mammals built their kingdoms of quiet. They nurtured their young with tenderness unknown to their predecessors. Small bodies pressed close for warmth, gentle squeaks in the night. The age of dominance had given way to the age of care. Survival, it seemed, no longer belonged to the strongest, but to the most adaptable, the ones who listened to the rhythm of change rather than resisted it. And as the world healed, the small began to dream. They dreamed in instincts, of light through the canopy, of the taste of fresh fruit, of safety found in numbers. Their lives were short, but full. Each generation carried whispers of improvement, invisible but vital. What once took centuries, now took millions of years. A slow bloom of possibility under patient skies. The silence that had blanketed the earth after the great extinction now hummed with life again. A softer kind of music. Insects buzzed through morning mist, amphibians croaked beside newborn rivers, and the wind carried the faint trill of birdsong. It was not the thunder of the Cretaceous. It was subtler, more intimate, as if the world was speaking in a lower, kinder tone. From these small beginnings, destinies unfolded. In one burrow, a mammal with nimble paws and curious eyes learned to grasp. Its descendants would one day hold tools, light fires, and write stories about the stars. In another, a creature learned to balance on two legs, freeing its forelimbs to gesture, to build, to create. These quiet experiments of time, unnoticed, uncelebrated, would shape everything that came after. But for now, they were only shadows in the ferns, whispers in the grass. And perhaps that was enough, because the beauty of life lies not only in its triumphs, but in its persistence, in the way it continues even when no one is watching. The earth, having burned and wept, now observed with quiet awe as its smallest children rebuilt its song. Every blade of grass, every flicker of movement beneath the soil was a note in the planet's long recovery. Above, the moon watched faithfully, its pale face reflected in new lakes and rivers. It had seen the rise and fall of empires older than memory, and it would see this rebirth too. Tides still obeyed its pull. The oceans, calmer now, rocked the new world in their slow embrace. The sky was once again a place of wonder rather than fear. constellations re-emerging like forgotten dreams. And in that silence, something miraculous began to happen. Curiosity. The small creatures began not only to survive, but to explore. Their eyes, once fixed on the ground, lifted toward the light. They sniffed the air, tasted the wind, followed it to new lands. Evolution's quiet march had turned a corner. From fear to wonder, from hiding to seeking, it is easy to overlook the small, to measure history by the loud, the colossal, the spectacular. But it is always the small that endure. The soft steps of persistence echo far longer than the roars of power, and so, beneath gentle skies, the earth began its next story. Written not in fire or thunder, but in whispers of fur and feather. The giants had fallen, but their memory lived on, carried in the quiet pulse of those who followed. The small had survived, and through them, the earth remembered how to hope. The earth was quiet now. A gentleness had returned to its breath. What once roared with giants now murmured with renewal. The soil, still warm with the memory of fire, cradled the seeds of a new age. Ash had settled over everything, but within that grey dust, life stirred. It began, as rebirths often do, in silence. Tiny ferns pushed through the soot, their emerald spirals glistening with dew. The air smelled of wet earth and the faint sweetness of return. Rivers carved new paths through landscapes scarred by time, carrying with them the whispers of what was lost. And above it all, the wind sang softly through empty skies, as though searching for wings that had not yet returned. But soon they did. In the corners of the recovering world, the descendants of dinosaurs, small, feathered, delicate, began to flutter again. They were the inheritors of the air, children of creatures that had once ruled both land and sky. The first birds were fragile things, their bones light as sighs, their feathers shimmering like scattered sunlight. Yet, within their tiny hearts there was something immortal, the will to rise. Evolution had written a new script, one born from the ashes of extinction. Where strength had once meant survival, now it was adaptability, grace, and lightness that mattered most. The world no longer belonged to the colossal, but to the agile, the clever, the quiet. Each feather was a triumph of resilience, a remnant of scales transformed into instruments of flight. With every beat of their wings, these creatures rewrote gravity's rules, turning the memory of thunder into song. The air, once filled with smoke, now shimmered with motion. Soft wings slicing through beams of early dawn. From the ruins of fire, the sky learned how to live again. In time, forests thickened, rivers widened, and the climate softened. The earth, which had seemed broken beyond repair, began to hum with colour. Trees stretched upward as if to greet the returning light. Flowers, a relatively new experiment in the story of life, burst into being, painting the land with hues unseen since before the Great Fall. Pollen drifted through the air like golden snow, carried by the wind and by the tiny wings of insects that danced in the light. Birds found them first. Drawn by colour, by scent, by survival's quiet logic, they formed an alliance with the blooming world. In exchange for food, they carried life from flower to flower, spreading the seeds of rebirth. It was a simple pact, but one that would shape the future of the planet. The air filled with new sounds, chirps, trills, gentle rustles of movement. Where once the earth had echoed with the bellows of beasts, now it resonated with melody. Each note seemed to heal something ancient, something wounded. The forests became orchestras of renewal. The birds were more than survivors. They were storytellers. In their flight patterns and songs, they carried the memory of what had been lost. Their feathers held the lineage of thunder lizards, their bones the echo of giants. They were not a separate creation, but a continuation, proof that even extinction is not the end, but a turning of the page. Among the canopy, some grew bright and bold, painting themselves in blues, reds, and golds to attract mates. Others, like shadows, moved unseen, blending with bark and leaf. Each species was a new idea in the imagination of evolution. Every wingbeat was an experiment in possibility. And so the world took a breath. Far below, mammals, those quiet survivors of catastrophe, watched from the undergrowth. Their nights were filled with the sound of flapping wings and the soft murmurs of creatures nesting above. To them, the birds must have seemed like spirits, unbound and ethereal, reminders that even after death, life can rise again. In the fossil record, this transformation would be written slowly. Bones would tell the story to those who came much later, how dinosaurs did not vanish entirely, but changed form, their descendants singing long after the silence of extinction. The sky itself had become a living archive of resilience. Every sunrise now carried a message that from ruin can come renewal, from stillness can come movement, and from loss, beauty can bloom again. And perhaps in some quiet corner of time, the earth reflected on this transformation with awe. It had seen fire and ruin, yet it had also seen wings rise from the ashes. What other world, it might have wondered, could turn tragedy into flight? The first humans, millions of years later, would look up at the same sky and feel something ancient stir within them. They would not know the full story, but they would feel its echo, a soft recognition that life always finds a way to return to the light. They would watch birds gliding over rivers, tracing circles over mountains, and something deep within their hearts would whisper, "This is what it means to begin again." Flight became a symbol, not just of escape, but of transcendence. Every creature that took to the air carried a piece of Earth's hope with it. The same atoms that had once formed the bones of dinosaurs now danced in the feathers of sparrows. The same carbon that had fueled forests long dead now breathed through living leaves. The cycle continued, seamless, eternal, sacred, and so the ashes that once cloaked the earth were not the end, but the soil of new beginnings. In that reborn world, each wingbeat was a prayer, a soft, unspoken promise that life would always rise again. The giants had fallen, but their memory soared across the sky, glimmering in feathers and sunlight. The air was no longer silent. It shimmered with rebirth, with possibility, with the quiet triumph of endurance. The earth exhaled, and in that breath it sang, "From ashes I have made wings." The skies, once filled with falling fire, now glowed with life. A reminder that even the darkest night can give birth to dawn. Beneath our feet, time sleeps in stone. Every rock, every ridge, every hidden vein of earth carries a memory far older than humanity's breath. Deep below the green pulse of modern forests, the bones of ancient lives lie still, fragments of a forgotten world that once thundered with motion and light. They are not dead things, they are whispers. When the wind passes over cliffs and deserts, it carries the faintest echo of those long-lost days, when giants moved like continents across the land, when the air itself trembled with their voices. Yet now they rest in silence, entombed in the patience of the earth. Fossils are not merely bones turned to stone. They are time made visible, the earth's journal written in a language of pressure, minerals, and memory. The story begins with death, as all transformations do. A creature collapses into the mud beside a vanished lake, its body surrendering to gravity and time. The soft tissues fade first, returning to the soil. But the bones, the enduring architecture of life, sink deeper, layer by layer, beneath sand, silt, and sediment. Slowly, minerals seep into them, atom by atom, until what was once bone becomes stone. The transformation is so gradual it could be mistaken for sleep. And in a way it is, a slumber that lasts for millions of years. The earth keeps these dreams carefully. Pressed between layers of rock, they rest in darkness, a hidden archive of existence. Mountains rise, oceans retreat, continents drift like slow clouds across geological ages, and still the bones wait. They wait for eyes that can remember them, for hands that will brush away the dust of epochs and listen. When those hands finally come, human hands trembling slightly as they touch the past, the earth exhales. A new kind of awakening begins. To unearth a fossil is not to discover a relic, it is to meet a ghost. The paleontologist kneels in the dirt, carving carefully with brushes and tools so delicate they move like whispers. The surrounding silence feels sacred, as though time itself is holding its breath. Each uncovered bone feels like a syllable in a sentence written long before language. And when the full form emerges, the curve of a rib, the sharpness of a claw, the arc of a jaw, something extraordinary happens. The ancient world breathes again. In museums, we see these remains posed under light, majestic skeletons suspended as if mid-stride. But to the earth, they are not trophies. They are memories returned to the surface. Each fossil is a message from a planet that has seen countless lifetimes. They tell us not just who came before, but what endurance truly means. Consider what it takes for a single bone to survive eons, floods, quakes, eruptions, erosion, the relentless turning of time's wheel. And yet it endures. The same minerals that once built mountains now hold the shape of life that walked among them. Every fossil is a conversation between biology and geology, between the pulse of life and the stillness of stone. Some fossils are immense, titanic femurs of creatures that once shook the ground with every step. Others are delicate, the imprint of a feather, the outline of a leaf, a footprint pressed into clay. Each one is a record of breath, of movement, of being. To look upon them is to remember that we too are temporary, that our bodies are made of the same dust that once carried wings and roars. And yet there is comfort in that thought, because if bones can become stone, then memory can become eternity. The world that existed before us did not vanish. It became part of us in our atoms, our oceans, our air. Every inhale carries a fragment of what once was, molecules recycled through billions of years of creation and collapse. When we breathe the past. When we touch the earth, we touch time itself. In this way, fossils are more than remnants. They are mirrors. They remind us that existence is not linear, but cyclical, that extinction is not absence, but transformation. The bones of dinosaurs became limestone cliffs that cradle birds. The shells of sea creatures became mountains. The forests that shaded giants became coal and stone and soil that feed the forests of today. Nothing is ever lost or only changed. To the earth, time is a circle. To us, it is a story. And fossils are the punctuation marks, the pauses, the breath between chapters. Imagine for a moment holding one in your hand, a fragment of a jaw perhaps, smooth, cool, heavy with history. You turn it in the light, tracing the ridges worn smooth by the patience of ages. Somewhere in its mineral veins, the memory of sunlight still lingers. Sunlight that once shone on a living world, now buried in silence. The mind cannot fully grasp the distance between then and now, and yet somehow you feel it, not as a thought, but as a quiet awe. The fossil does not speak, but it listens. It listens to your heartbeat, your breath, your soft wonder. It has outlived everything it once knew. Oceans, forests, sky, and still it endures. In its silence it carries a truth, that all things pass, but nothing truly ends. That truth is both humbling and comforting. We too will return to the earth one day. We will join the endless conversation between dust and memory. Our bones will rest among theirs, indistinguishable from the stones that cradle them. And perhaps in another distant age, when the earth has healed and dreamed again, something will unearth our remains and wonder who we were. Fossils are not just about the past. They are love letters to the future. They tell whoever comes next, we were here, we lived. We learned to love the light. The earth holds them gently, these stony echoes of breath, because they are its own memories too. Every fossil is the planet remembering itself. Every bone a fragment of its long, unending dream. As the sun sets over badlands and cliffs, shadows stretch across the exposed strata. Each layer a page in time's endless book. Somewhere, deep within that story, the earth remembers the first breath it ever took, and the first life that dared to walk its skin. And as night falls, the stars appear overhead, ancient witnesses shining down on fossils of worlds long gone. Perhaps that is the truest connection. Above us, the sky keeps the memory of light. Beneath us, the ground keeps the memory of life, and between the two, we stand, brief and beautiful, listening to the echoes of forever. Night falls upon the sleeping planet, and for a long while there is only silence. The deep, resonant kind that follows endings. The air is still. The oceans breathe in rhythm with the turning of the moon, slow and tidal, like the heartbeat of something vast and dreaming. The stars above shimmer not as distant suns, but as memories reflected on the surface of time. The earth has grown quiet, but not empty. It is dreaming again. Dreams are how the universe remembers itself. And when the earth dreams, mountains rise and rivers find their way through stone. The soil begins to hum with potential, whispering to seeds that do not yet exist. Even in darkness, the promise of life is already taking shape, unseen, unborn, but waiting. After every extinction there is a pause. The earth breathes out, releasing the weight of what was, and then, slowly, tenderly, it begins to inhale again. The elements gather, restless with creation. Carbon dances with oxygen. Hydrogen hums with nitrogen. The chemistry of life rehearses its return, like a symphony tuning in the dark. And then, quietly, it begins. The oceans stir first. Beneath the surface, where sunlight fades into a soft blue whisper, invisible things awaken. Molecules combine, separate, combine again. A slow cosmic conversation written in the language of chance. In that silent choreography, a cell forms. Then another. They drift like specks of light through the water, unaware that they are rewriting eternity. Millions of years will pass before these cells become anything we might recognize, but time has no impatience. The Earth, after all, has learned the art of waiting. Its dreams move at the speed of continents. Soon, color returns. Coral blooms rise like thoughts from the ocean floor. Forests unfurl again, weaving their green voices through the wind. The world begins to breathe in unison once more. From every crevice and current, life spills outward. Insects shimmer, leaves reach toward the light, rivers carve new songs through the valleys. Each sunrise feels like a first sunrise, each drop of rain like a memory being rewritten, and the earth, in its vast and endless patience, watches it all unfold with the quiet wonder of an artist rediscovering their canvas. Somewhere, deep in the stillness of this reborn world, mountains remember their ancient weight, oceans recall the lives they once cradled, and the wind carries echoes of voices long gone. But the earth does not mourn. It transforms. Every loss becomes soil for a new beginning. Every ruin becomes a root. Even in our own time, this dream continues. When we walk barefoot across a field, we touch the same ground that once held the bones of creatures whose names are lost to history. When rain falls on our skin, it is the same water that once nourished the first forests. When we gaze at the moon, it pulls not only our tides but our hearts. A reminder that even from afar, the cosmos shapes our rhythm. We are not separate from the Earth's dream. We are its continuation. We are the breath of its sleeping mountains, the echo of its ancient oceans. The same minerals that once built the spines of ammonites and the shells of trilobites now flow through our veins. We are living fossils, walking constellations of everything the planet has ever been. Perhaps that is why we dream too, because somewhere within us the Earth remembers. Our dreams are not accidents of the mind. They are reflections of the planet's own imagination, fragments of its vast, unfinished story flickering in our sleep. In the hush between heartbeats, when the world outside fades and the self softens, we return to that deeper rhythm, the slow pulse of creation and decay, the eternal tide that has shaped us since before thought. And maybe that's the secret the Earth has always known, that nothing truly dies. The forms change, the faces shift, but the essence, the quiet, shimmering spark of being, endures. It flows from stone to soil, from soil to root, from root to flame, from flame to breath. Life is not a single line but a circle, a song without end. Sometimes, when standing beneath a full moon, you can feel it, the ancient heartbeat beneath your feet, the hum that connects the oceans to the stars. It is subtle, but it is there, the reminder that the planet itself is alive and that you are part of its dreaming. Close your eyes, listen. Beneath the rustle of leaves and the sigh of waves, you can almost hear the earth whispering, not in words, but in sensations. A low, resonant warmth that tells you, you belong. You are not above nature, nor apart from it. You are the continuation of its story, a fragile, brilliant thought within its mind. In this way, every sunrise becomes a resurrection. Every night becomes a page turned in an infinite book. The fossils of memory have become the seeds of rebirth, and the dream of the earth continues through us, through every living thing that stirs, grows, breathes, and dares to love, because love, in all its forms, is how the universe sustains itself. It is the gravity between life and time, the unseen current that keeps creation moving forward. Even stars die in light, not in darkness. Even after collapse, there is brilliance, and so the earth dreams again, not of endings but of continuations. The moon still pulls the seas, the sun still kindles the soil, and life, impossibly fragile, impossibly stubborn, continues to rise. Somewhere in the wind, the ghosts of the past linger, not as sorrow but as music, a song the world has been singing since its first breath, a melody too vast for any single ear. It hums through the mountains, through the oceans, through us, and as night falls once more, the earth settles into its endless rhythm, turning softly beneath the stars, dreaming of everything it has ever been, and everything it might still become. When you lie down tonight, feel that rhythm beneath you, the faint vibration of the living planet, the soft murmur of soil remembering your ancestors. You are sleeping not on earth, but with it, part of its pulse, part of its dream. So close your eyes, let go, drift with the tide of breath and starlight, because the earth is dreaming again. and tonight it dreams through you.